We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and seek the truth. With FBI whistleblower and common sense extremist, Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast, Tuesday, August 18th, 2026. And barring a catastrophic technological failure like we had at the end of yesterday's show, hopefully we'll be able to send you off at the end of today. But by the end of today, we will have covered down on a whole bunch of different stuff with my buddy Keith Malinak, who's waiting in the weeds right now. We're going to talk about how Anthony Fauci is no longer the science, but maybe the collapse of science. There's a medical journal out there that is hiding how the coronavirus vaccine might have killed millions of people. The U.S. military is scaling back its exercises in South Korea. We spent $500 million on an artillery plant that didn't produce any missiles. HHS is reporting about doctors doing meatball surgery on young boys. The college students and professors out there might just be retarded, and consumers are being duped by terms like avocado oil and healthy food. So a lot to get to, excited to get to it. Let's get after it. There is my friend Keith Malinak here to join me. There was no sort of rapture. We were not disappeared for some reason. The software streaming failed us at the end of yesterday's show, but it was a good experience. We got some training scars in, and I think that we'll make a habit this week of taking the stream from 0700 to 09-ish in the morning, and I'll actually repost it overall in the regular time for the American Radicals Podcast. So that way we can have chats going in the morning and the afternoon, and we can double up on all of those things like the likes and the subscribes and the views. That's how I'm going to trick the algorithm, at least. We'll see if it works.
I like it. I'm just attempting to get today's show to pop up on my stream so that more folks can find it. So just bear with me on this end. I will say that yesterday our technical issues at the end there where it cut us off, I'm still bitter about that because in that part that right after it cut off, I made probably my most brilliant points of the entire morning, and nobody saw. Nobody saw.
You just have to use it as momentum to get you
That's right.
rolling in today,
Get back
early
in the game.
on. Now look, professionally, Keith, for those who don't know, your day job over at the Blaze, you've been kind of occupying this time period, this space for a pretty long time. I'm just curious, what time do you normally wake up in the morning?
This you're gonna hurt me. My alarm. I never make it to the alarm. I don't know what it is, but I'm usually up around 3:00 or so, and then it's it. I was about to say it's a lonely drive in, but as Dallas has grown exponentially over the years, it's actually a lot more crowded now. But there's not nearly enough sleep when you do a show this early in the morning, that's for sure.
Oh, man.
But yeah, I'm the executive producer for Pat Gray Unleashed over at The Blaze. That's my day job. And then I do my own thing over at atmshow.com. Yesterday, if you have 8 minutes after today's American Radicals podcast, if you have 8 minutes over at atmshow.com, I make the case that Joseph McCarthy was right during the Red Scare of the 1950s. So you might want to check that out.
Are you contending that changing the title of the OSS to the CIA and yet keeping all the communists as part of the executive branch was not enough to change course for the country?
I tell you, man, there are so many of those things in American history that nobody realizes. In fact, coming up on my Friday conversation, we talk about the Nazis that were given asylum within our government. They were given government jobs in the United States after World War II. So now that you say it like that, it's a fun week of revisiting the middle of the 1900s there for sure.
Well, speaking of the worst people getting jobs in government, let's kick it off with Anthony Fauci today. This is, I guess it's a Substack. It's from the Disinformation Chronicle. And I mean, I guess it's a little bit dated because we've already moved on. The news cycle's 15 seconds long now. Everybody forgot that Anthony Fauci was called back to testify and invoked the Fifth Amendment over 100 times, and nothing will happen TM to him because he's got that auto pen pardon from President Biden. But I do think that this piece here at this Substack is worth just going into a little bit, because the guy here who wrote it, Jason Locasal, it's entitled Anthony Fauci and the Collapse of Scientific Authority. I think it's a little bit of play on him saying, I am the science. And what this guy actually did was look through those diaries that Rand Paul revealed. And there was some salacious stuff in there. I mean, he was talking about how he was hanging out with the pretty woman chick, the Aaron Brockovich chick, Julia Roberts. And you know, he was the media darling, and that was ultimately what he was concerned about. It looks like the emails that he was sending on a government email were geared towards writing a memoir later on. But what this guy wound up doing was digging into him and extrapolating a bunch of different things. And I kind of tuned out because I know nothing's going to happen to Anthony Fauci, but that's maybe a mistake on my part from one particular aspect. And I've said we can't have amnesty for coronavirus. It is not a reconcilable difference that we can just move on from. But effectively, that's what we're going to have, because the reliance is going to be amnesty via amnesia. It was a crazy time for us all, and let's not think about it too much. And that will, in effect, give us amnesty when we really need some modicum of accountability, even if it comes into the form of everybody knows that you're a dirtbag and you should be publicly shamed for the rest of your days. I mean, if that's all we can get, any port in a storm. So this guy winds up digging into, and he does it in a pretty intellectual fashion, is different components of the diaries and what he can take away from it. And just a couple of key things that I want to just get your thoughts on here, Keith, and we can react to it. He says that what the diaries reveal, those self-curated notes reveal his priorities. Science is less as an intellectual pursuit than as a credential supporting public performance. Fauci and those around him privately disclosed scientific possibilities that they publicly dismissed, even attacked as conspiracies. I mean, didn't you have to wear a mask? Didn't the science say that a face diaper was necessary? And if you were going to walk into a restaurant, you had to wear the mask, and then you could take it off when you sat down. The molecules didn't percolate when you were only 3.5 feet above the ground, but once you got above 60 inches, then it became dangerous.
Oh, it just pisses me off just to even think back of that time. But we have to, you're right. Or else, if you don't think your fellow countrymen are going to fall for this crap again with something else, you are greatly mistaken. Because it's like when you punish a kid, man. If you just let stuff slide, it's just going to get worse and worse, and they're going to keep offending. If there's no punishment for the crime, it's just going to continue. And I stand by what I say. The worst American in all of our nation's 250-year history is Anthony Fauci. Period. I know Benedict Arnold gets honorable mention, but Anthony Fauci is responsible for, as far as I'm concerned, the death and isolation and heartache and illness that continues to linger for so many Americans. And the fact that this guy will never really get punishment on earth is just devastating, I think.
He's the personification. He's really the punching bag for so many people today. But I think ultimately, when you lift the guardrails from one particular side, that's when we got true tyranny in this country. When there was no downside to being too careful, when you're actually rewarded for being overly careful. It became an arms race between decision makers to see who could genuflect and virtue signal about just how careful they were being, because the mayor in the next town over is saying that you need to stand 6 feet apart. But here, I'm going to say that we need to stand 20 feet apart, and we should actually cordon off entire areas and put sand into skateboard parks. I mean, it became a competition for despots, one to another, to try to appease the masses, because there was no downside. Nobody was going to say like, is that a little bit of an overkill? Because you could always say, well, if it saves just one life, right? So apart from just like the meta look, the idea of authority, an appeal to authority, I am the science. No greater example than Anthony Fauci. His title as being the head of the NIAID, the confidence and his media presence. I mean, the guy, I mean, you wait 5 seconds and you'd see Anthony Fauci doing an interview on TV throughout all of 2020. Say, the quote here is, once an institutional position has been adopted, contrary evidence became an obstacle and dissenting scientists became opponents to defeat, which is kind of contrary to all scientific endeavors. If you're really into science, you never say, I am the science. You never say, I am right on this one. Science is a process. It's not a personality. It's always saying, hey, this is what the evidence is showing now, but we need to always get more information, and we're open to changing our opinions. When you issue some sort of an edict, you say all the information we've gathered to this point is indicating X, Y, and Z, and then that opens a door for, well, later on, like A, B, and C might actually be more correct.
But when it comes to Anthony Fauci and so many politicians, even if they've contradicted themselves over the years, and even if you present that evidence to someone, I as much as people worshipped and continue to worship Anthony Fauci, um, I think it goes back to didn't you have that quote yesterday that people would rather be what is it? Oh my goodness. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm mixing my conversations. I had a conversation with a guy yesterday on a different topic altogether. And it was like people would rather be not let's see, know that they're wrong than be proven that they're wrong or something. I don't know. They'd rather it basically show the confidence in their incorrect opinions rather than have to admit that they've been fooled this whole time. And I think that's what happened a lot with the Anthony Fauci stuff, is that even if you gave them contrary evidence that came out after the fact, or even if you went back and showed that Anthony Fauci had a completely different opinion beforehand when it came to masks, for example, or immunity and vaccines, it doesn't matter, because once you're now convinced that even if you will never admit it, maybe not even to yourself, that you've been duped this whole time, you can't go down that road. And now you just got to plow full steam ahead. And that's how people like Anthony Fauci get away with this stuff. And you see it in politics too, on the left and the right. Even if the guy that was their horse and they backed this person for the election and forever how long, look, I'm never going to admit that I was wrong, or I got that wrong, or I shouldn't have pulled the lever there. And by the way, I'll be the first to admit that I got Cash Patel wrong. My bad.
Wow, well, you're showing a modicum of humility there, which is in short supply.
I
But
know.
I think that's a human inclination, no matter what. I would see it for particularly older people who had been bilked out of some sort of like a financial scam. You would get called because, hey, I think my grandma might be getting ripped off. It was never grandma who called. And you would go to talk to grandma and you'd find out, well, yeah, that she had been scammed.
Yeah.
And in talking to her, it wasn't like she was a 78 IQ. It was just somebody who had been taken to the cleaners for one reason or another and had kind of realized it. And then in order to just silence those voices, to prolong actually having to admit to themselves that I got scammed, they would continue to knowingly send money to the scammer. They would wind up being, instead of about $30,000, now it's $80,000. And it was just a failure to do a sunk cost analysis. Hey, it's a stupid tax. Hey, that really sucks. I lost 30 grand because people are terrible and I was maybe a little bit naive. But in order to just delay having to make that admission, you would see additional financial damage to the person. And it happened not in an insignificant amount of times where I was just kind of like, okay, this is an actual human condition sort of thing. It's not just a one-off.
Right. And I think that the stakes were so much higher with COVID and the vaccine and Anthony Fauci that, yes, it's devastating to lose your money in a scam and be taken to the cleaners like that. But now there are more serious layers to the Anthony Fauci COVID era insanity, because now you're talking about your health, your long-term health. maybe you convinced a loved one to get the vaccine and now they have a heart condition, or God forbid they died, and you're always going to have in the back of your mind, am I responsible for that? For my aunt going and getting that because I said go get vaccinated and you can come over for Thanksgiving. I don't know if there are people out there living with some sort of guilt, or maybe they're just still in denial that everything's fine and the vaccine was fine, and I don't know, but it's just such a dark era in our nation's story, and there's people like you and me and in this audience of yours that recognize that, but there's still this large swath of Americans who don't even see it through that lens and won't even take a moment to even consider that they were fed these lies. So I don't know, man. It's tough, and it's really tough when people like Anthony Fauci, we know, aren't going to be held accountable.
Well, they're not going to be held accountable because even to this day, people who work purportedly in bringing information to the public awareness are just letting a little bit of drip and drab out there, but still refusing to do the mea culpa, and take accountability for what their mistakes were. And they might have been mistakes in good faith, right? Oh, I trust the science. I'm still a little bit naive. The guy has a stethoscope and a white lab coat, and he probably uses a Bunsen burner. So ergo, he must know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And I saw this clip. This is this guy from ABC News. This is worth just giving a little bit of play. He's talking about how Anthony Fauci himself spiked ABC News's story about where coronavirus came from, the origin story.
Wow.
What was more likely, if you're going to be a commonsensical Occam's razor type of person, you have a city with a bioweapons lab run by a bioweapons expert from the Chinese military that's doing studies on bat coronaviruses, or the bat that flew 600 miles without landing and then gnawing on a pangolin, which barfed into a stew, which was consumed by patient zero. The latter, of course, had to be true. That's the way it was. So ABC News was actually at the time going to run a story that said, not that one was true or the other one wasn't, but hey, maybe we should possibly consider the natural origin story might not be the most accurate thing. This is this guy. I can't remember his name. He's from ABC News. It's a little bit long. I think it's like a minute and a half.
So shortly after, it was COVID. So it was like early in 2021, maybe January, February. I'm seeing online and elsewhere people that I thought were smart and serious, Jamie Menzel mostly, saying, and others, maybe this leaked from the lab. And I was like, well, that's interesting. So I went to Nightline. I said, hey, I'd like to do a story on, and they were like, great, yeah, let's do it. So we just across the board, we talked to, molecular virologists. We talked to people in the Trump administration who had been in the Trump administration. We broke a little news that that lab had been funded by the Chinese military, despite the bad lady saying no, it hadn't. Mm-hmm. And that came from the security, a tip from inside the one of the three-letter agencies in the government. And we kind of laid it out. And at the end of the day, my own personal feeling was, talking to everybody, I thought it's probably a little bit more likely it's natural. But if you told me it had leaked from the lab, fine. And it's probably not cooked up. It's probably not a Frankenvirus. But I didn't reach that conclusion. I just laid it out. And we're ready to go. And the day that it's supposed to air, it gets reviewed. And it comes back to me, and it is incomprehensible. And I've never been angrier. I'm in the booth.
These lawyers?
Lawyer standards. And I was told, Fauci.
Oh?
And I said, I can't do this. And they're going to air, and it's a 15-minute piece or whatever. And I'm cursing and screaming in the booth.
And this is day of
air. And I'm just absolutely livid, beside myself. And I'm usually, I tried to be a good colleague that way. It's important to be respectful of.
Okay, I can't take it anymore. Okay. He tries to be a good colleague and then waits for half a decade to come out with this information. Now that it's politically convenient, he won't be drawn and quartered for going against the science. He's going to say, "Oh, Fauci suppressed my news report."
I just want to real quick as a aside. It was ABC News that also spiked the Epstein story, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that right there, what didn't Fauci run in 2020 and 2021? I mean, he was the de facto president for a couple of years. He clearly was in charge of ABC News programming, and I. It was very sinister what Anthony Fauci has gotten away from or gotten away with. But what I want to know that we will never know is I want to know the financial stakes that he had in that vaccine and personally and promoting that. Anyway, back to you, Steve.
Well, I didn't know, and it was actually in that original piece that I threw up, and I'll share that just again for the visual, what his background actually was. He's a doctor, right? So, he probably went to college. Do you know what his background is and actually how he got into the position he was for over 40 years?
I used to know when I was rage reading everything I could about him back in the day. But do tell, please.
He majored in the classics as an undergrad, and then he went to medical school. And in medical school back in his day was, treating patients. But then he went to work for the government running labs, which he had no experience in doing, and just became part of the gerontocracy, where it's just government by the oldest people. And it was presumed that because he'd been there the longest and because the budget had expanded, that he knew what he was doing, so he should be in charge of things. And on top of that, he made efforts to credential himself. So what he would do is use the levers of power more directly. He would take the money that was stolen, tax from the American people, and then bequeath to his agency, which was an institute, a part of the Health and Human Services, part of the NIH, was the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, which I shouldn't know, but I have to know because we all lived through it. Okay.
Yeah.
And he would, this is how they say it here, that he favored traded. That's put very nicely. It's put in a very like ABC News anchorman type of language. Okay. Fauci reached out to his friend at Duke University. Is Duke a podunk JUCO, or is that a pretty esteemed university? He reached out to a friend at Duke for award nominations for himself.
This pops up all the time with this guy.
Duke receives hundreds of millions of dollars from NIAID. So it kind of seems like a little bit of a racket where it's like, hey, you got a nice business going on here. Maybe you should pay us for protection. Okay. Organizations then ranked Duke according to how much money it was getting. So Duke was not only relying on the money to operate its laboratories and its studies, but for its ranking so that it could charge exorbitant tuition fees. And then those rankings are presented as evidence of excellence. And the Duke administrators are considered for senior positions back over at the National Institute of Health. So it's just one big giant circle jerk. And they made sure they gave Anthony Fauci his awards, which have then followed him on into his career. He's still lauded within academia. As much as you and I and people in the AMRAD pod audience, people in the At the Mic audience, people across the conservative influencer space, content creation space are saying like, this guy is the devil incarnate. If you go to the university setting, he's still an invited speaker. He's still receiving awards. This guy is still where he was at in 2020 within the ivory towers of higher learning within the country.
I will never forget Anthony Fauci and what he has done to this country. But I will say that my body temperature had at least gone down a little bit until you just went through that. And now I am sufficiently as pissed off as I was in 2021. And that's the thing we have to do is we can't forget this stuff. And there was a lot more there than I had learned about him previously. That was excellent. And you know what I learned just now listening to you is that he became the de facto head of science in America because he knew how to play the system. It wasn't based on his knowledge or his expertise or anything like that, which, by the way, he, of course, fooled the entire planet into thinking he was the science. I mean, he's bold enough to say that himself. But just I want to go back for just a second here. This is the trap that we get into. I call it basically, it's like homeschooling. When you tell people in your life and in your family that you're going to homeschool your kids, and they look at you like, "Oh my gosh, do you have a teaching degree? Do you? I mean, your kids. I mean, are they going to learn from you?" And right, and so and since there's this institutional mentality, and it's with boomers and those that are older in our American society that look at you as like, well, I don't think you're qualified. I don't think you're qualified for this. And that's the way they looked at us during COVID too. It's like, wait, so you want to look out for your own health and make your own choices, but what do the doctors? What does Anthony Fauci say? But if you could present to them, I mean, it's too late now, but present to them, Anthony Fauci's not even a real doctor effectively. Besides, even if you roll out his track record of killing people and torturing animals throughout his career, it rings hollow because it's coming from you and you're not wearing the white lab coat with the stethoscope around your neck.
For whatever reason it was. And I think there's a significant portion of people who have broken free of this mindset after having lived through 2020, 2021, all the way up until today, as it pertains to the medical community. But for a long time, that particular industry evaded our awareness when it comes to the Adam Carolla joke trope that when you're a kid, you look at the adults in your life and you say, well, they have cars and jobs and houses, and they seem to be well adjusted and they probably know what they're doing. And then you look to your classmates who are eating paste and you're saying, well, they're retards. And then you grow up and you realize that the people who are eating paste now have jobs and cars and houses. And you say, oh, the adults were retarded too. They just were taller than me. But again, they had white lab coats and stethoscopes and Bunsen burners. So they probably knew what we were talking about. No, it wasn't the case. And incredulously, it's still a very politicized industry right now because of what's gone on with Anthony Fauci, with him being brought out in front of Congress again. There were all these talks, not just about him, but about some of the studies about the coronavirus vaccines that went out there. And I've even seen the idea proffered that the whole flatten the curve. Remember the 15 days to flatten the economy? I mean, the curve. That was actually on purpose so that we could delay all of the globe from getting to some sense of herd immunity. Remember, you couldn't say herd immunity,
right?
Because we wanted to delay that so that we could have the vaccine come out, because we needed to give billions over to big pharma. But it went out for this experimental gene juice, and may or may not have, but it did result in a lot of deaths that were unnecessary, either waiting for it or when they put that clot shot into their arm. So there was a study that was thrown out during these hearings a couple of weeks ago when Anthony Fauci wasn't answering any questions. And the medical journal that published it now in 2026 has suddenly retracted the study that said that the gene juice might have killed some people. Just now they've gotten around to it, now that it's become politically inconvenient for them. So this comes from Modernity News. The headline is British Medical Journal retracts paper linking COVID shots to millions of excess deaths. So the British Medical Journal has formally retracted a 2024 paper. I mean, have you checked the calendar? It's significantly later than that.
Wow.
That tracked more than 3 million excess deaths in 47 countries between 2020 and 2022. Now, the paper itself that was just retracted, it never claimed that the vaccines were the sole cause, because it was actually pursuing science. It's saying, hey, this is the information we have, but as always, we need to get more information. That's how science, it's a jobs program, really. Like, we always just need to do more of it. But the paper simply observed that excess deaths persisted despite the implementation of containment measures, stay home, stay safe, and vaccines, and urged governments to investigate thoroughly. And that was enough, because they said it's a conspiracy theory and it was used during a congressional hearing. So we need to pull this thing back and retract it and completely debunk it. Very much like what was done in 2020 when people were saying that it definitely 100% came from that lab. right? Oh, that's a conspiracy theory. Or your herd immunity, that's a conspiracy theory. Or walking one way down a grocery store aisles will stop you from getting an upper respiratory infection. What do you want, grandma to die?
I mean, look, I've spent the last 6 years, bro, trying to get over this, and you're not making it any easier. You're picking at some scabs, man. That just. But I go back to this is the tale of two Keiths. It's like you're making me angry right now. But we should be angry. This was a destroyer whose reach we will never fully quantify. It's impossible to know the damage that it did. And I could get into education and little babies trying to learn to speak, and the isolation and the suicides and the heart issues and the sudden deaths. I will say this. Thank God I had the common sense to demand that neither me nor my family was ever going to get the vaccine. It nearly cost a great job opportunity for someone in my family until I was able to make a couple of contacts inside one particular state's government, a state that you're very fond of, I'll say. And I was looking out for my family, and I just have to say, the stress that must exist with good people that didn't want the shot or regret the shot or what have you, that they must feel, and maybe many people listening right now. God bless you, because if I had taken that vaccine, anytime I would have felt any kind of chest tightness or my toe hurt or anything, any health concern that I had for the rest of my life, I would always have that stress in the back of my mind. Oh, hell, maybe it's that shot. Why did I take that shot? And that's the kind of mental anguish and stress that you can't calculate the effects of on a society. And so I hope and I pray that whatever effects that damn thing was going to do to people has passed. Do I believe that it has in all cases? No, I don't. I think it's still a ticking time bomb for a lot of people. But my gosh, man. And then we go back to Fauci, and you're going to get me pissed off because I'm going to think this guy will never face a reckoning here on Earth. And we're still paying him $400,000+ a year, I might add. And I have run the numbers. If we had put him in Leavenworth, it would cost us less as taxpayers to feed him, house him, clothe him, and keep him locked away from the rest of society, all Americans and beagles breathing a sigh of relief, than what we pay him now to roam free.
Maybe we should send him to participate in military operations with South Korea. Let's transition.
Okay, let's go.
So there was a little bit of a brouhaha afoot because for years the United States has done joint military operations exercises, field training exercises with South Korea.
Mm-hmm.
Now I think that war is still going on. I don't think there's ever been an end to it. So for all the talks of how long it was, it's kind of like in a ceasefire. There's a demilitarized zone, and I remember, gosh, this was this was the 2012 election cycle when Barack Obama was doing the reelect. The Republicans are figuring out if they wanted to be like super conservative and pick Tim Pawlenty, or go, more milquetoast, middle of the road with Mitt Romney. And for a minute, Donald Trump was kind of testing the waters. And I remember him talking about these military exercises specifically because I thought, like, that's a weird thing to throw out there. I mean, he hadn't caught the tidal wave of like, hey, Mexico's sending us their rapists. Like that one caught on. I guess at the time he thought, all right, people probably really care about joint military training exercises with South Korea. And he was saying that this doesn't make any sense. The United States is footing the bill. Millions and millions of dollars here for South Korea. Nobody cares about South Korea. Let them put the bill. That was like his tagline. Well, jump ahead a decade and a half, and now the apprentice is the president of the United States for the second time, and he has gone after his, I guess, long-term bee in his bonnet, because CBS News reports Trump orders a scale back of military exercises with South Korea after refusal to help with Iran's denuclearization. So maybe a little bit more of recent events were weighing into it. And actually, the president himself put something out on his Truth Social account, which I'll do my best. I mean, we'll see about the capitalization and the grammar errors that we typically get with these posts. But we'll say, quote from the president: "Based on my very good relationship with Kim Jong-un of North Korea, I am not happy with the fact that the United States has long ago agreed to participate in joint military exercises with South Korea." That's called a non sequitur. These exercises are not only costly, with much of these costs being paid for by the United States of America, as usual, but send a signal that is totally inappropriate and hostile to a country, capital C,
right,
that as long as Donald J. Trump has been president with a capital P, has been unthreatening and respectful, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think his entire reason for shutting down or reducing the size and scale of the joint military operations with South Korea is due to his long-held belief, at least since 2012, that we're spending all this money, we don't necessarily need to do it. It's probably more of a recency bias of, hey, we invited you guys to be part of this kinetic operation, definitely not a war in Iran, and you weren't interested, probably because China's really close to them and they have to look out for their own best interests. And secondly, I think there's an actual objective observation that goes on here and says, for every dollar, every missile, every drop of gasoline that is used in the Pacific with South Korea, that's a dollar or a missile or a drop of gasoline that we can't use in the definitely not a war. How dare you call me a stewardess, some flight progress coordinator, foreign entanglement in Iran.
Yeah, man, it depends on what the topic is that Trump is battling at any particular time, and if you're not on board with that, well, then that's justification for not helping you with issue X. South Korea, how are they on tariffs? Because they might hear that if you're not with us on the tariff thing, then we're not going to help you with this military exercises.
I really want to have a Hyundai. That's going to make it difficult.
Boy, man, you made such a great point there. And when we were talking off air, where it could just be as simple as we are stretched too thin in Iran right now. So we're going to just say, hey, if you're not going to do this, we're not going to be a part of this, because we can't come out and say, well, actually, sorry, South Korea, it's because we don't have enough missiles left, and that is a big concern that I think there's been a lot of smoke since February 28th in that respect. And I think you're spot on in that.
Well, I mean, just from a logistical, operational standpoint, if you're involved in a high profile, at the very least, but a major kinetic conflict with another foreign nation that is bringing in other foreign nations into involvement, I mean, I don't know what level of training that was going on in the military in the 1940s, but I imagine there weren't too many like joint FTXs in South America going on while we were sending troops to storm the beaches of Normandy. We were kind of like, we're going to get OJT.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily need to like prepare for the next war. Let's fight the war that we're currently in.
Yeah. And we don't want America to be the world's police. Well, here's an opportunity to not be the world's police. Of course, that's it this simultaneously while we're being the world's police. So maybe it doesn't quite work that way. But my goodness, I just, what I hate about well, there's so many to list off, but one of the things that I hate about what's happening with Iran is the fact that China is getting to see so much of our playbook. They got these drones and satellites, and they're flying way above the action, and they're just watching how we operate. And they're gathering this data in real time and on the battlefield itself. And I don't care for that. We're just letting them into the. It's almost like you're practicing for the big game, and you're opening up the practice field to your number to the team you're going to face in the Super Bowl. Hey, come watch us out here on the practice field.
Yeah.
But don't take notes. And I'm just concerned that they're gathering a lot of information that could be helpful in a place, say, near South Korea.
Mhm. Yeah. And we truly might be short on our artillery supply because I guess, and this will really fire you up, Keith, because you're big on the military industrial complex. I know you love sending money that's stolen. I mean, tax from you to Lockheed Martin and to Raytheon and Boeing, in this case, General Dynamics. And this one's actually in Dallas. So it's really going to hit close to home, actually, for you. This is a story from ProPublica. It is a very long story that tells you the whole story in the first few paragraphs and then just goes into really, really in depth. So
time out. Why do writers do that? They realize the attention span. It's not going to get you to page 20.
No. And look, I'm very sympathetic. This is a total aside. I've written probably 12, 15 op-eds. I've had some connections with media sources that have been extremely gracious and published my thoughts. And I put a lot of work into what I wrote, every word that I wrote. So I try to give the maximum amount of grace to people when I read, because I know, and at least I hope they didn't have AI write it. And I hope that they sort of labored over every single word. And I say, hey, when I wrote my thing, I was hoping people would read all of it, first sentence to last. So I will try to give that same respect, but man, it's a struggle when I do the total word count and realize that I'd be, a quarter of the way through War and Peace by the end, when I really could have gotten the main bullet points, high points out in the first few paragraphs. So I'll put the link for the show notes today for the whole thing if you want to, but we can kind of touch on this. This is a General Dynamics artillery plant in Dallas.
Uh-oh.
And this is what they describe that's gone on there over the last few years. The robot arms would swing out of control, smashing into carefully calibrated equipment. Sometimes they would unexpectedly drop hunks of steel 5 feet onto the floor. The factory's signature device meant to precisely stretch the steel that would over the artillery shells, instead cracked it beyond repair. And then there were giant press machines which required regular pounding with a sledgehammer. They put people on full shift with a sledgehammer, and they just said repeatedly just bash it into the machine to make sure that it keeps working.
Wow.
So the Department of War spent $533 million with General Dynamics to fabricate these armaments, these artillery shells. They ordered, though, that work to stop because clearly there was a problem in August 2025. There were 3 different products. 2 of them, they were like, nope. And the third one still was not really online. The fiasco has cost taxpayers that full amount, $533 million, which we haven't recovered. It's still in the pockets of General Dynamics. And the assurances they've given back is, when you give us the next contract, we'll give you discounts on that stuff up until $533 million, because the assumption is that we won't just break off business with these guys at all, because they have a complete lockdown on the military industrial complex, on the Department of War. There's enough contacts back over at the Pentagon that they say, well, I know what we messed up to the tone of $500 million, but it's a drop in the ocean. You guys are spending 1.5 trillion. So we'll just give you a discount here, a discount there. And in the end, you'll have recouped $533 million.
Ooh, so much anger. Okay. Let me just say this. And you can understand why General Dynamics would be so confident that there's always going to be wars to produce armaments for. So they're like, yeah, look, we know you're going to be back. Here, get the man.
I got to throw the image of the actual shells for the visual here. Okay. Let me see if I can zoom in a little. Oh, dang it. So you'll notice the spiraling if you happen to be watching us here. The spiraling on these shells, they're supposed to be smooth, Keith. They look like TCBY swirly ice cream cones.
So we're gonna get the General Dynamics manager signature on this coupon and just bring it back. And even though he may not work here, when you bring this back, we're gonna honor it. We're gonna honor it. And we may not. The guy who gets the coupon with the guy's signature may not recognize the manager that signed this, but damn it, we're gonna honor that when you bring it back for the next war. And I know what this is. I know exactly what this is. This is, I guarantee you, do you remember how they sold all of the money that we were giving to Ukraine and the effort to stop Mother Russia from marching all throughout Europe? It was, hey, we're creating jobs here in America.
Yes.
We're gonna be, think of all the great stuff, and people are gonna be employed, and it's a win-win. We stop the Soviets from marching through Europe again, and you guys have a job at home. Well, apparently, the job that I remember specifically Lindsey Graham himself making that argument, and so yeah, I see how it's playing out. Beautiful. Just come back with that coupon and we'll give you 533 billion off.
Yeah.
I can't with this.
I mean, you and I were talking, I think it was just offline, about the 2012, back to the 2012 presidential election, and how the DNC ran this gigantic puff piece with the soaring music behind it, and Joe Biden providing the voiceover for Barack Obama, having made the most brave political decision in the history of the country. It was more brave than any decision that had ever been decided since Charlemagne roamed the earth. And that was the decision to send the SEALs to go and kill Osama bin Laden. And it became this laugh line on the Republican side of saying, like, come on, it's the #1 terrorist in the world. You know where he is. We've been trying to chase this guy down for over a decade. It's a non-decision as a chief executive to go and send the special forces in to go and execute that dude. That's, for you to try to pitch that as a brave decision is patently ridiculous. We're all laughing at it. I'm going to be contrarian here. I'm going to subvert the expectations, and I'm going to agree with Joe Biden, who at that point was not a human Roomba, just mildly retarded, because Barack Obama, by deciding to go and kill Osama bin Laden, effectively removed all justification for the United States to be involved in Afghanistan, which put a bunch of our money on the table that was supposed to get shoved out to General Dynamics and Lockheed and Raytheon and Boeing. So it effectively was a pretty brave decision, because that's going to make your lobbyists really, really upset. That's going to make all of your allies in the legislative branch, who you need to come and push forward your agenda, really, really upset with you. So from a political standpoint, I think you can say that was brave, even if it was an evil sort of conversation to have.
Boy, that's a hot take right there, Steve Friend, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean, that is one thing we have learned, whether it is the most liberal Democrat or the most staunch conservative Republican. The wars continue, man. It doesn't matter. They're not. We haven't had a president that didn't answer to the military-industrial complex since 1963.
I think
we see where that got him.
There's a lot of truth to the Simpsons movie that has Arnold Schwarzenegger as the president, where the advisor comes in the room and he says, "Sir, we have 3 plans for you. You have to decide." And he goes, "I was elected to lead, not to read." And they just hand him the plan that they want to give him the entire time. I think there's quite a bit of that actually goes on in there.
Gosh, yes.
Which is I don't know, a decent transition. We could let's talk about the vice president for a second.
All right.
Off of the military-industrial complex, onto the LGBTQAI+, #_*, rainbow kamikaze, mostly heavy on the T, because this is the medical industrial complex that made a lot of money, according to the vice president and RFK and the head of, what was Dick Levine's thing? I can't remember.
He was the assistant
of HHS or
Surgeon General.
Yeah. We wore a uniform or something like that. So they came out and they're talking about fraud that was involved with this tranny madness, cutting off the twig and berries of young boys and breast tissue of young girls. And they're looking at it from a fraud perspective. So the vice president got on camera with a couple of different principles. It looks like they're reading the teleprompter, so it's not as artful as typically JD Vance tends to be. But let's hear him out for a few seconds. Of course, it's going to fail because that's the way the things are just going.
Oh yeah, that's a common theme on my own show at the mic.
Well,
is that you go to play something and it's just like, nah, you're getting a circle.
Dang it!
Circle.
Well, I have the accompanying literature, so we can do that instead.
But I wonder, does anybody ever smile? Because you got the guy on the right there. He looked damn serious. And RFK, I think he may not be able to smile, honestly.
No. RFK, I don't know how he can, because he's gone from being the Maha guy to saying that glyphosate should be back into our foods, and we should subsidize Ozempic.
See, everybody answers to someone else. Oh, that one hurt though.
But what they're actually talking about here is this is a press release that came from Health and Human Services. And it is about exposing fraudulent insurance billing. I guess this is the way they're going to try to creatively curb the amount of the meatball surgery that's going on here via executive influence, the golden handcuffs that are attached to it, or it's probably part of the anti-fraud task force that the vice president has been tasked with leading. That task force, which didn't invite the FBI to participate, even though the FBI exists to confront fraud. So according to the report, there were 225 hospitals and health systems established pediatric gender programs nationwide. 225. That's like 4.5 hospitals per state, Keith. 4.5. There's hardly a shortage of these facilities, and the language game that gets played with this, it never ceases to amaze me. I'm a guy who gets focused in a lot on language because I think there's a lot of subversion that goes on there. There's a lot of power in there. You can influence the way people perceive things and act around things if you just subvert the language. I mean, out of the context of the tranny madness, I think there is no greater example of that than what has gone on with abortion, which is not the original term. I mean, the original term would be infanticide, baby murder, but I mean, that sounds really gross. So, we'll go with termination, but the Terminator is the bad guy. So that doesn't sound good either. So we have to go to abortion, which means that the rocket never got off the launch pad. The mission never happened. So we can kind of erase it. And then, the context of that kind of got a little bit gross, and we had to change and pivot over to, well, it'll be one side against the other. So everybody can be positive. We'll be pro-choice and pro-life. Nobody's anti anything. And then, well, we have to cast our enemies politically as being as the bad guys. So there's pro-choice and anti-choice, anti-abortion. And then it became reproductive rights and reproductive justice. I mean, justice for all. I mean, that's in the Pledge of Allegiance. Are you against America, Keith?
Right? You skipped one of the stops along the way. The justification was safe and rare.
Yeah, Bill Clinton.
And also one thing I'd like to point out to those living in Massachusetts, what your governor signed last week has nothing to do with safe and rare, where you can now terminate right up to the moment of birth. Mm-hmm. But anyway,
well, the language with the tranny madness is, if you speak English, it's 180 degrees the opposite. Now, I like to play this game with my wife a lot because she's really savvy. And she's English second language. So I think that she's actually probably more in tune with what the words mean than what they're implied to mean. So when I say to her, hey, when I say gender affirming care, what do you think I mean? Well, affirming gender would be, so if you're a boy, we say, no, you're a boy. That would be affirming your gender. I'm like, oh, no, you speak English. It's actually the opposite of that, right? And that's what they do with this sort of thing. So, and these facilities 225 of them around the country. They're actually doing some fraud, or at least it's being accused here. It's being now, I guess, referred over to the Department of Justice. So this report that came out again from Health and Human Services, it's connected to the vice president, putting his stamp of approval on there. The report analyzed nationwide claims data from the last 10 years and identified $50 million in insurance claims for puberty blockers, but they were billed as endocrine disorders. So fraudulently, in order to stop puberty, we're going to say, oh, he has an endocrine disorder. And then also $11 million for patients from ages 13 to 17 was billed as a code for precocious puberty. I guess that means that your puberty is faster than it should be at age 13 to 17. I think you're pretty much in the meat of when puberty is happening. But again, it was as puberty blockers. So we can push pause. It's the same analysis that scientifically went on with the coronavirus, where they said we can push pause on a global economy like it's a DVD player and have no permanent consequences. This is what these drugs allow us to do, is to push pause on a biological process. So, we can just unpause it when you're 26 years old, and there will certainly be no downstream consequences. I mean, if you push pause on a restaurant, on a sub shop, on the corner, just think about the logistics that go into that, where you have to order the rolls and the bread and the deli meat and the condiments and the napkins and the plates and the soda distribution. All of that push pause. And that's why 60% of small businesses went out of business and never came back. What's going to be the consequences for all the kids that we have just jacked up with a bunch of puberty blockers? I imagine it'll be somewhere in the area of 60%, which ties pretty nicely to the suicidality, who just don't make it to their full lifespan.
That's such a great analogy on what we did with our economy in 2020, and comparing it to what they do to these kids. And you're right. I mean, they talk about the high rate of suicide among trans kids. Yeah, look at the suicide rate among the trans kids after they go through these surgeries, these life-changing, life-altering surgeries. I've had this magazine here sitting on my desk for weeks, and I just thought at some point this is going to become useful, and I thought it was going to become useful on my show, but it turned out I'm gonna make it useful during your show, the American Radicals podcast. So the reason I have here a Rolling Stones magazine from December 11th, 1997. So you can see it's got Mick Jagger and Keith Richards on the front there. We got all sorts of good stuff here. REM, What's Next? Oh, I don't know. I guess Monster is already out. Anyway, let's see. Notes from the Babylon, but I don't know what that. Oh, the Stones were on tour. When are they not on tour? Look, The Verve. Wow, remember them? There's some good songs from that. Oh, the Spice Girls, Metallica, Sublime, Jane's Addiction, all with new albums. Wait, what's this top thing say? It says The Case of John Joan by John Calapinto. And inside this article, inside this magazine, is this article of a botched circumcision that a twin baby boy, and they just decided, you know what? Let's this guy named Dr. John Money. Let's do this. Let's experiment. Let's make this little boy with the botched circumcision. Let's make him a girl. Let's make him a girl, and then we'll have all sorts of data, and we'll see what happened. It was a disaster, and suicide was involved in the end. And this little girl always knew that he was a boy. And the reason I have the magazine, and I don't just have a tab open on my computer, is because Rolling Stone refused to put this article talking about the actual real world harm that happens to a child who you try to genetically modify. It's impossible. And they didn't have this in their archive forever. And I had to go to eBay or wherever the hell I went to find this paper article so that I had this thing. And it's devastating. And it's just such a sad, sad story. And the reason I bring this up is I want to ask you, Steve, and your audience, Is the tide turning on butchering our kids? Is this fad finally fading away? Because I went and I checked, and as of March 2025, they finally put this article into their archive after keeping it absent for so long. The case of John Joan, and I would encourage you to go and read it and be sufficiently depressed and just think of what should have stopped this train wreck that has played out for decades since. This was 1967 that they butchered this baby boy and made him into a girl. And tell yourself, why the hell didn't that Frankenstein experimentation on our children stop right then in 1967? And why they hid articles like this that showed you what really happens in the fallout of butchering a child. And so I wonder, do you think the tide is turning? I mean, states like Texas are going after those kind of surgeries and those doctors here. And other places as well, and it just feels like maybe how dare I be positive about something, but does it feel like maybe the tide is turning against doing these to children, just like it's just something fun to do on the weekend?
I don't know. There might be a certain level of insulation. I mean, if you're surrounded, if you live in Texas, I live in Florida. I think the wave never really crested on either one of these states to the extent that it has in places like California and Illinois and New York.
Yeah.
But certainly, I've seen kids that were my kids' age that are clearly being groomed for it in my state. So I don't know where it stands right now. I'm just appreciative of the actual history. I thought that was always just a story from Law and Order SVU, Keith. I didn't know that was a real story.
Yeah, it's
Come
sad.
on, you know that was Identity, aired in January 2005. Law and Order
wow.
SVU.
I didn't know that. My
No,
goodness.
I remember that because I used to like that show, and I thought that had to be a real story. And yeah, you did. You brought it up here. Okay, I actually, that's a pretty good transition because you asked the question of is it still going on? I want to talk about this really dark one from Andy. No, I'll bring you right back down to the black pill level here.
That's where I live, baby. Bring
So
it on.
Andy No has his own Substack, or I guess it's a .com. It's called No Comment, which is excellent. It's well titled.
Yeah.
But he's covered down on a lot of the trans issues that have happened, and he's calling this a trans cult. I don't know if they are drinking Kool-Aid, but they are murdering children. So we'll give a little advance warning here. We keep it family friendly as much as we can. I will keep the worst elements of it, try to be as adult and scientific as I possibly can on it. But the headline, another trans cult. 7-year-old victim was groomed to be trans before he was found tortured to death. Again, pretty graphic, pretty dark, but Andy No reports it accurately, unlike most of the media, and he does actually call out the media for their failure to be accurate on the actual gender of the offenders in these cases. So a woman and 2 men who identify as women have been charged in Cincinnati, Ohio, in a brutal torture and murder of a young special needs boy.
Oh.
The group, which included 3 men, because one of the men was the boy's father, but he wasn't charged. I guess he was out of the picture, but he himself was also a tranny. So we've got 4 adults, a woman, 3 dudes, and the 3 dudes think they're chicks. They groomed the child into trans ideology from a very young age and appeared to have plans to transition him before police found him unresponsive in a closet, bound with duct tape and showing signs of torture. His name was William Michael Evans Ellis. He has a hyphenated last name because I guess mom and dad are no longer together. 7 years old, recovered from an apartment in Cincinnati, August 6th, suffered injuries consistent with being choked and held underwater, beaten and burned. Just, I mean, that is an SVU plot, by the way. I mean, like straight out of the bowels of hell, something that Dick Wolf would put on camera, right?
I don't even know how to comment to that. I mean, that is what a horrific story. That poor child never had a chance in this world. He was raised by demons, and I think it's absolutely fair to call so many. You're either a part of the trans cult or you're actively being recruited by the trans cult. Whether you're being raised by those demons or they're your school teachers, um, or it is a way to absolutely destroy a human being, um, heart, mind, and body. And I don't know what to really say about this story. I've seen it pop up in my feed here, and it's just the most depressing tale, and it just shows you um, the mindset of so many in that community. And and I don't know what else to say about this, Steve. It's just, and I don't know how you and your background on investigating this stuff.
Ew.
I've talked to people like you, um, that I know, and in my own family, who I don't know how you guys, because we need people investigating stuff like this. That's the thing. This stuff, if anything should be prosecuted, it's harm against children, and murder especially. Um, my goodness, I don't know how you guys, how you were able to compartmentalize and live a normal life and still do that as a job. But God bless you, man.
Yeah. Oh, let's take a detour. Let me tell you my story. This is my favorite case. Not because the case wasn't awful, but because it had a good outcome. Working on an Indian reservation, I get called. I was in Nebraska on a Saturday doing like one of these outdoor festivals with my kids where there was like log rolling, and it was like one of these woodsman type of things. There's archery. We're having a good time, and I get called by one of the police officers on the reservation, and he said really, really disturbed. I mean, he's a like rock solid guy, one of the best cops that I worked with, and he is clearly shaken. He said, "I came up on something, and I need your help, and I need you out here now. All right, what's going on?" And he says there was a party at a house last night, and as often happens, people imbibe in the spirits on the Indian reservation. And one of the drunken partygoers happened upon a small closet, I guess, like a basement dungeon closet that had a latch on the outside, and opened it up and found a special needs child inside in a basement dungeon. So we have the foster mom under arrest right now and the foster dad under arrest right now. Can you come and start working out what's going on here? So I got there, and as it came to pass, this woman who was really the primary suspect, her husband went along with it too. And as an aside, he'd been convicted of murder, done his time, and then was home in a home where they were fostering children. So Department of Child Services really working really great over on the reservation.
Hmm.
She worked for the Department of Child and Family Services on the reservation. She arranged for this special needs kid to be put into her care because she knew that she would get extra money because he was a special needs kid. And then they would lock him in this basement dungeon with like a bag of chips and in the dark. And they had an alarm on it on the outside. If he was able to escape containment, they would find out about it. I mean, he'd been really had a pretty rough go of it. She'd facilitated his removal from his parents, who were adequate caregivers, so that he could be put into her care. I mean, like one of the most diabolical plots of all time. Now, what ultimately happens is I get her confession. It was one of the best interviews I've ever sat down. I mean, it was like straight out of the interrogation where you let her tell her story, and then you give her enough rope to hang herself, and then you bring it in. And she'd never really been in trouble, so it was kind of it was a good interview. I get the confession. We're good to go. I'm excited. I'm like, hey, we're going to put these people under the jail. They're never getting out. But then, as what often happens with prosecutors, the lawyers get in, the legal eagles, and they start thinking and hemming and hawing, and they say, well, we don't want to put this kid on the stand because we don't want to have him have to relitigate his experience. And he's also a special needs kid. And he's been put back in the care of his family. We were trying to be as little disruption to his life as possible. So now they're trying to think of a way to give these people a sweetheart deal for having tortured a little kid. And I remembered that when I was a cop, before I was an FBI agent, and I was in Georgia, there was a code on the books that said that if you locked a kid into a room, it could be contrived as kidnapping at a state level. And I said, well, is that a federal sort of angle that we could take with this one? So I dug through the legal code book and I found that in special jurisdictions like Indian reservations, that law applies. So we had a 20-year hammer to hit these people with if we wanted to use it, if they wouldn't plead to the deal we ultimately gave them, which certainly wasn't sufficient, but put them in prison for like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. Happy ending, got that kid back to where he needed to go. But that stuff is going on all the time. It's just looking at a child as an opportunity to, make an extra $400 a month.
How long had that kid been with them? Do you know?
He'd been with them for a year.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. He had been there with them long enough that he had calluses on his back from sleeping on the concrete floor. I mean, it was just so disgusting. I mean, he said things in his interview with the specialists that still stick with me, like his friends were the mice that crawled over his legs, those sorts of things. I mean, just some of the darkest stuff that you'll ever see. And I mean, I look back to it and it's dark, but I was also kind of like a black sheep where I could compartmentalize that and say that's evidence. And that's going to allow me to get justice for the kid. So it doesn't, creep into my personal life. I don't have like the PTSD that some people complain about, which, as another aside, the FBI encourages you to not work those cases because they say you're going to get PTSD. So they tend to not get worked very well or very minimally. And I think that just reflects sort of badly on our law enforcement culture, particularly at the federal level. I mean, you need people to go do those things. You need people to be willing to go do those things. I think that one of the questions that you should have to ask people in order to work in law enforcement, in addition to what we already ask of you, is, the question is, will you use violence if you have to? If you don't answer yes, then you can't be in the club. I mean, it's pretty simple. You carry a gun on your hip. Will you use violence? Are you willing to carry a firearm? If you're not willing to do that, what many people in the FBI aren't willing to, I don't think you should be allowed to. I think, are you willing to investigate crimes against children? Should be required. But I think right now we just have such a dearth of people willing to do those sorts of things that then we'd have very few cops that were actually out there.
All right. But I have 2 questions from what you just said. Are you suggesting that the federal government just doesn't go after those that are harming kids because fill in the blank? I mean, they don't want to expose their officers to that? Did I pick up that correctly?
Yes. It's the lowest priority.
So we just let the kids suffer and we turn a blind eye, or we just try to plea out everything without a full investigation?
We try to plea it out, or if we have to investigate it, we try to not investigate it. I've had federal prosecutors tell me to not investigate human trafficking cases because they were too hard or too complicated. And I think a lot of it is back to what is the definition of success for a bureaucracy, because ultimately law enforcement is a bureaucratic organization. If you're a bureaucracy in the government, particularly in the federal government, success is growing, getting more money, getting more funding, getting more people, getting more goodies, all that sorts of stuff. In order to get the goodies, you have to go to the people who give you the goodies, which is Congress. The appropriations comes from them. And in order to get Congress to be excited to give you the money, you got to give them stuff that they can go brag about to their constituents, that they're going to be really hard on crime. And as much as you and I are saying like, well, yeah, the people who hurt children, they need to be held accountable and to the furthest extent possible within the law, that doesn't play in Peoria. People don't want to think about it. People would rather just pretend it doesn't happen, sweep it under the rug, and focus on other elements of law enforcement that are sexier, that we do TV shows and movies about. We're going to go after the gangbangers and the terrorists and the bank robbers. And we're going to have a press conference where we all wear our blue windbreaker raid coats and then have a giant pile of dope and money and guns on the table. But if you had the exact same press conference and there was just a hard drive on the table and the press were like, what is that? Oh, there's 40,000 images of young kids being sodomized on here. They'd be like, oh, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to hear about it. So it becomes a popularity game, and you're going to go where you can get the most popularity and the most acclaim, and ergo sell it to Congress and get the most funding. And that's the game that gets played at the federal law enforcement level. And that's in the most innocent bureaucratic explanation, because otherwise you have to say, well, they don't care about kids.
See, I can understand why the press wouldn't want to cover that. I mean, that story that you had there is absolutely horrific, and I can understand that. Look, you have an audience. If you're a media company that you're trying to cater to, and people just don't want to invest the emotion in reading those facts. But as law enforcement, I mean, that's a different breed. And can I just ask, speaking of law enforcement, are you telling me? I have two questions actually. You're telling me there are actual people that apply for jobs at the FBI who don't want to carry a firearm? That's my first question. And then my follow up to that, sir, is are there jobs in the FBI? I suppose there are desk jobs, right, where you don't have to carry a firearm, or yeah.
Yeah. So second question is real easy. There's around 38,000 employees for the FBI. 13,000 of them are special agents. So the majority of people who work for the FBI are non-gun gun toters.
That makes sense.
Administrative, intelligence analysts. There's lots of jobs in the FBI, but there's a disturbingly high number of people who either once they get out into the field don't carry guns, because I don't know. I mean, from a female perspective, it's kind of hard to get a wardrobe that accommodates carrying a gun. A lot of females are like, oh, I'll put it in my purse. That's not good for drawing down on a bad guy. But you also in the FBI are not a first responder. So a lot of times they can say, well, I just drive from my home to the office and I work counterintelligence, or I'm in the skiff doing trying to entrap some sort of a retard in rural Arkansas into a white supremacy thing, and I don't have to get off my butt. So that goes on.
That's okay if we don't have FBI agents carrying firearms, because that's done by the IRS now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, 1811, man, 1811s. That's the criminal investigator designation in every single agency. It's a shocking number of people who have the ability to take away your freedom with the force of a gun. And we've kind of like got over to I think naturally, and I think this is a really good jumping off point for this. I wanted to talk about a couple of free speech ones, but as long as we're on the child exploitation things, let's start on this one, because this involves artificial intelligence and child exploitation, CSAM, as we call it in the biz, which is child sexual abuse material. Somebody probably got promoted because that's an acronym that's better than saying kiddie porn.
Yeah.
It is a story from the Washington Post. It's an exclusive. Headline is Her Childhood Photo, Thousands of Explicit Images, One Woman's Nightmare. And what it boils down to is that this woman's stepfather took her image when she was a young girl and used artificial intelligence, specifically Grok, which the Washington Post wants to point out is owned by Elon Musk, who likes the president, ergo he's mean, orange, and literally Hitler. But what the stepfather did was take the image of her in a completely innocent way. You know, she just was wearing a t-shirt, sitting on the couch or something to that effect, used the AI and created 7,000 fake explicit images of her using the chatbot. And that ultimately wound up getting to the attention of law enforcement via a whole process, which I can educate you on a little bit. But before we do that, it gets to law enforcement. They come in and raid the house and are able to inform her about this. And it gets into a First Amendment conversation to a certain extent, because those images aren't real. You could loosely articulate that they're art to a certain extent. I mean, they're not original. They're not actually her. If they're not real, are they child sexual abuse material? And is this enough for her, as she is doing right now? She's Jane Doe. She's with 3 other girls who 2 of them are still underage, suing because they've been exploited. It's a tough question because of the slippery slope argument to it. Now, from a federal law enforcement standpoint. I dealt with PDF documents or, Adobe, where dirtbag pedophiles would take young children's faces and put them on adult bodies for the image. And local police would say, hey, we can't charge that. The prosecutors are not comfortable with it within the state law. If they look at the elements of the crime, it just isn't there. Federally, you could. So there was a way of doing it. But again, it's copying or it's cutting and pasting, sort of doing like a Photoshop. The body and the head are both real images. This is, again, a different animal entirely because the image is drawn by artificial intelligence. It's not a real image.
Yeah. And then you get into the whole debate on what is art. Right. I mean, that is such a tough one. And I don't know if I'm a juror or a Supreme Court justice. I don't know sitting here right now how I would rule on that. That's I got to think on that one.
Yeah.
But I
well,
mean,
from a criminal standpoint, as being a juror for the dirtbag, you don't have to be. He killed himself, as they often do. He opted out of the life of the system. Many of these people, once they're caught, do that. I mean, that's one of the highest likelihoods that you will engage in violence in law enforcement is when you're going to go with arrest a pedophile, not because they're particularly violent, but because they just want to go suicide by cop. It just happens a lot. That was still bothers me. Once I transferred to Florida to work on child pornography cases, my first case that I had that I got an indictment on, he offed himself. So I never got to claim the stat of getting him sentenced. I got him convicted. He pled. He was going to plead guilty the next day, and then he opted out. So, but he set himself on fire.
Oh, wow. He
got a head start on the afterlife, Keith.
I was gonna say, I think as an agent there, I think you should have kind of like in the hockey standings. I mean, you should get a win and a loss and like a.
You get 1 point, not two.
And, so you should get something for it. So this is not a complete non sequitur, but perhaps you're familiar with my little dog Matilda. There she is. I tweet her pictures out a lot. She's a cutie. She's a sweetheart. And what was weird is that last night, and she was bugging me. She's like, "Hey, I need you to post this picture of me." And I said, I don't think that's kind of tacky, Matilda. That's not your style. What are you doing? And there it is. She insisted that her adoring fans get that picture instead. And I was like, what are we doing here? And I guess she got inspiration from Nancy Mace, a sitting congresswoman who wanted to show off her new tats.
So Nancy Mace, the sitting congresswoman from South Carolina, I think she ran for governor, was it, and fell short in the primary. But
yes,
she's the wet t-shirt contest congressperson. Like she peddles the wares so much. I did not pay attention to the story. I'm just aware that it exists. For those listening, she's got multiple sleeve tats like all over her arms. Did she get these tattoos while in Congress? Or
I think she's just got them. I don't know. My understanding is they're fresh ink, and just so you know, that the tattoo community commented underneath her post. It said those aren't sleeves. Those are just tattoos there, Nancy. So I don't know, man. It's just weird. Like, as my youngest daughter would call this. Nancy Mace appears to be the ultimate pick-me girl, right? Just look at me, and here are my arms. And I wonder. I don't want to be curious as to what that one thing. What does it say there? It says, Mrs. Dalloway said she would buy the flowers herself. What's that in a reference to? Do we have any idea?
Not hip to the culture enough to know what the heck that means.
Mrs. Dalloway flowers. What book? Do we want to guess what book that's from? It's from the novel. You ready for this? Mrs. Dalloway.
Oh, all right. Well,
and it was written in 1925 by Virginia Woolf. So I'm sure that there's some deep meaning there.
But just some nice cultural references. I mean, I thought when she got those gigantic tattoos all over her arms. That was reference to that TV show Prison Break, where the guy got full on tats on his back.
You know, I if you know me at all, it takes me about 40 years. That's not an exaggeration. It takes me between 30 and 40 years to watch a movie that just came out. Although I'm on a winning streak now. Spider-Man, Masters of the Universe, and The Odyssey. I saw all of those like in the first week. I'm kind of proud of myself, but please clap. But it took me forever to watch Prison Break. And I started to watch it about, I don't know, maybe a year ago. And we'd always see the previews during 24. You're like, I don't know, should we watch the Prison Break thing? You know, I mean, this is 25 years ago, y'all. And we never stuck around to see it or tune in before. I don't know if it came on before or after. It doesn't matter. The point is, I never watched it, and I started watching it, about a year ago. And I got about 12 episodes in. And the actor, the guy who plays the main character with the tattoos all over, and yes, you gave it away for those that still haven't seen Prison Break.
Spoiler for the 25-year-old.
Spoiler alert! The prison that he's breaking out of, the map is on his body. Well, why did he get into prison in the first place? I guess
kid
you just
sees
have to
dead
watch.
people, by the way.
So you just have to watch the Prison Break if you haven't yet to see why he's even in there to begin with. But is it me? And this is taking way too long to say, but I got bored with that. I was like, are they going to get out or not? And then I was thinking, they did multiple seasons of this. I got about 12 episodes in the first season. And as much as I like the guy and the storyline, it was so frustrating. You ever get so frustrated with a show or a movie that you're just like, I can't watch any more of this. This is taking too long.
As I've become an elder statesman, Keith, I've become increasingly quick on the hook on shows where I could really genuinely like a TV show. My wife and I might be watching it together. It could be like our thing. And then one comment comes out and I'm just like, I'm out. I'm not watching it. There's more than enough other things out there that I can spend my time on. Yeah. I don't need to be angry, which is typically why I watch stuff like John Wayne movies, because I figure that I'm not going to be offended.
There you go. There you go. By the way, if you haven't been able to tell yet, I have what they call undiagnosed ADD, but go ahead.
Let's stay on free speech and law enforcement, though. I think this one's going to be a little bit less difficult to parse out here, but you never know, because there's a political angle to this one. And I guess we have to give our land acknowledgement, throat clearing, to say that we might not necessarily agree with the person politically, but we can agree that the government should not be the arbiter of right think and wrong think, at least from my standpoint. I won't speak for Keith on this one, but it's an NPR update on a case that I've spoken about before, but I don't know if you're aware of it, Keith. The headline here is Department of Homeland Security defends investigating agency critics and giving them warning notices.
Excuse me?
So this individual here is not the only one, but he's been one of the most high-profile people. His name is David Striever. 2 ICE special agents came looking for him at his home in June to ask him about a scathing email that he sent to the former acting director of ICE. Wow, I mean, if you transmit threats via the wires, then that can be a federal crime. He sent this email to Todd Lyons. The email compared Lyons to a Nazi and predicted the ICE leader would be tormented by his own conscience. The agents left Striever's wife with a warning notice because he wasn't there. He was actually traveling. He'd gone overseas with his daughter on a vacation or something. He wasn't at his house. They left the wife a notice and said, you have to sign and return this to us. The notice said, quote, in all caps, you may be in violation of federal law, and listed federal laws that make it a crime to threaten federal officials. The bottom of the form read, quote, receipt of this notice will be taken into consideration should you continue to be involved in any criminal activities described above. Striever sued and argued that the government's actions caused him to self-censor and violated his First Amendment. The federal government responded. Some attorneys have now involved in this lawsuit. They came from the U.S. Attorney's Office. They said that the relief he is seeking from having his First Amendment infringed upon by the United States government would, quote, unnecessarily inhibit the government's investigatory prerogative and justified their investigations due to an increased threat of violence against public officials. They said that in-person visits from law enforcement accompanied by these warnings about federal lawfare are a critical tool in investigating and preventing process, and they don't violate the First Amendment. No, I'm just going to go out there and say no, that is 100% against the First Amendment. You're allowed to send strongly worded emails to people within the government. They're not secret agents. They have public facing emails for a reason. And for you to say that you're going to be haunted by your conscience, you're allowed to call someone a Nazi. You don't have a right to not be offended in this country, even if you work for the government. It doesn't say that in the Good and Plenty Clause in invisible ink on the back of the Declaration of Independence. And to send armed agents to a person's house to deliver them, again, it's a nice house you got here. We hate to see something bad happen to it. You better shut your mouth. That's in the land of the alleged free.
So, okay, time out. These agents, before they showed up there, and you've been on the government side of investigations and stuff like this, you tell me, they absolutely knew this guy was out of the country. Yes?
I would think so, particularly if they're from ICE, because they work for Department of Homeland Security, and they would have access to his travel and that sort of thing. And that's presuming that they did a modicum of background on this guy before they just showed up to his door. They might have just been covering a lead from headquarters or something, saying like, hey, you need to go deliver this guy. He's sending some troublesome emails. And they just were like, oh, okay, we'll just go follow orders, rather than saying, well, what's in the emails? Are those really threatening? What's my mission set here? How does this violate the law? I mean, maybe they just didn't ask those questions like you would expect somebody who's paid $145,000 a year working for the federal government and has access to people's travel records. So they might not have been aware that he wasn't there. That being said, they should never have made the trip to begin with. That should have gone directly into the zero file, the circle file, as we like to say, which is the trash can. I'm
looking at this. Was there anything more specific than what you read there? Like, was there a I'm gonna kill you? I mean, was there anything like that, or was it just, yeah, your conscience is gonna oh yeah, and you're not. My gosh, how many politicians are called Nazis every day?
Yes.
How many of us are called Nazis every day online? I don't have an investigation going on against that, and I shouldn't. There shouldn't be. I mean, this is so easy free speech. I'm trying to find, is this is still being tied up, or has it been?
Now, the lawsuit that he has filed is still active.
Okay.
And I know another example of this, the exact same thing happening, where they gave this notice, was for a woman, and she's all about letting all the illegals go free, right? That's where she falls on things. And I guess the officer who shot Renee Good, his name became public, and she said something to the effect of, it's a good day to hold him accountable on Instagram or something like that. And that's hardly anything that's a call to violence or anything like that. But even if you wanted to construe it as the most letter of the law, as she was calling for something, you would just say, hey, what do you mean by that? And she'd say like, oh, well, he should be indicted, something to that, right? But the accusation was that she doxed him by saying a name that was already in the public, and ergo that necessitated a visit to her house from federal agents saying that you may or may not have violated the law. So you better sign this and acknowledge that we've advised you about violating the law. Now, I don't have a problem with agents of the government coming to a house and saying like, hey, you are getting close, or maybe you have violated the law, but we're going to give maximum latitude in some situations, I guess. But even then, it has such a chilling effect that I would quibble over it. I mean, it would have to be a very extreme sort of situation where you maybe do have a threat of violence, or something that could be construed one way or another, like an email comes in like, I'm coming after you. Okay. Well, that could be one way of you're physically coming after me. Or it could be, I'm coming after you next November because I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and, and run against you. that can be achieved by a phone call. Hey, I'm agent friend, and I got this notification that you sent this email. What do you mean by that?
Mm-hmm.
Very easily achieved, even if you're going to go that far. But certainly sending armed agents to a house to create that image is the problem that we were reliably assured was going to end, because weaponize or weaponization was the term du jour in 2022 and 2023. And we elected the greatest mascot and opponent of weaponized government in the history of all presidential elections in the form of Donald Trump Part 2.
Yeah, and that's one thing I know your audience appreciates about you is that you are a free speech absolutist. And I used to think I was until I met you, and I love that. And I will say that one of the criticisms that those on the right, myself included, constantly had with these hate crime laws is you're having to get into a person's heart. And first of all, hate's not illegal.
No.
But then you're supposed to like figure out the motivation and I don't know, man. Maybe he targeted that couple because they're black, and then there's an extra layer of punishment to it. And this is exactly what we're allowing the government to do, is to just go ahead and assume the worst case when they say something that doesn't land the way they want it to on the other end. And that's exactly the goal of the government when they show up to your house and they say whatever the hell they say. It's just about intimidation and getting you in line, and nothing more. And I respect what you're saying. Why not just follow up and just make sure that there's no actual credible threat here? And that's all fine and good. But I don't think 9 times out of 10 that is the goal of the officers who show up at one of these homes. They're just there to make a point that we're the government and you're not, and you better get in line.
Mm-hmm. That does have the chilling effect, even just showing up, and to not recognize the magnitude of what you represent, to just not take a second to diagnose that or analyze it and think, hey, I'm about to interface with somebody. If I'm an FBI agent, they view me as the entire FBI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Every time I would meet somebody, even in a social setting, they'd be like, oh, what do you do for a living? And they'd be like, oh, you're the only FBI agent I've ever met. Tell me all the secrets to Area 51, right? You represent the entire legacy of everything, even if it didn't involve you in the least. I was an FBI agent for 11 years, starting in 2014. And I was in a rural location in Northwest Iowa. And I remember my dad calling me up, asking me why I wasn't investigating Hillary Clinton in 2016.
That is awesome.
You just represent everything. And that's the full force and might of the US government. So even just doing the follow-up, a judicious, very cursory sort of, hey, just, what'd you mean by that? Can have an enormous impact on somebody. And we have Supreme Court doctrine and precedent that says even the slightest infringement on the First Amendment is irreparable. It cannot be undone. The bell cannot be unrung. And that should be something that, if you're an agent of the government, that you take with the full assessment and take it to heart and really decide whether or not it is worth the trip to somebody's house. And certainly if you're bringing documents that are in no way related to violating the law, you have to check yourself. And they're certainly not doing that there, because they are viewing, just like the last administration and the administration before that, forever, the status quo. If you oppose what we're about, you're some sort of a threat to our democracy, or whatever they're phrasing it like these days. All right. So those are free speech stuff. I want to kind of, I might be able to bring this pretty full circle, because we opened up with the coronavirus stuff, and you mentioned the learning loss that was affiliated with that. That's going back 6 years, and we're still feeling the consequences, may or may not be, because I've got a couple of things about education. And I want to start with this opinion piece about a math professor at Berkeley who's struggling to make sure that his students can do math. Okay. The headline is, I teach calculus at Berkeley. Some of my students can't do middle school math.
Oh, they were in the trailer with me. I know those kids.
It hit
That's
close
where
to
I
home.
was, behind the high school there in Marietta, Georgia. That's me.
So this guy, he says, 3 days a week, I stand in front of a lecture hall with 500 to 1,400 students. By the second week of the semester, I already know who is in trouble. Some students are 5 to 8 years behind in mathematics. Office hours that should be spent discussing integrals, this is a calculus thing, Keith, just so you know, instead become lessons on fractions and basic algebra you would expect students to learn in middle school.
Oh no.
Now, the background here, and he doesn't entirely lay it at the feet of this, but there's a little bit of affirmative action, DEI insinuation, and a little bit of coronavirus stuff. Because in California, like many other locations, in 2020, they said no ACT, no SAT, because those tests are biased, right? They don't give you an accurate portrayal of people. Now, before we get into the specifics of this, I don't like the SAT and the ACT for, let me subvert your expectations, for the exact opposite reason of why everybody else doesn't like it. They don't like it because it presents a situation where we actually have a merit to determine who's going to go to these schools. So we can't have that, which is why people can't do math when they go to college. I don't like the SAT and the ACT because they're contrived IQ tests, because it's illegal for somebody in the workplace to say, hey, Keith, we see you applied for a job here. This is a position for somebody who's on the far right-hand side of the IQ bell curve. We need you to take this IQ test. We know you don't know how to do this job maybe entirely, but we want to make sure you have the gray matter between your ears, the bandwidth in order to pick it up pretty quickly and get up to speed. That is illegal. They can't do that. So what do? We create a completely false and arbitrary system in which high school kids take the IQ test, which is the SAT or the ACT. And then depending on how they score on that, they got to go to college. And wherever the college is, gets a reputation for only taking people who score a certain amount on those tests. And then we just hire those people out of those colleges because we know that they scored high enough on the IQ test. Meanwhile, they've incurred $200,000 of student loans. Okay. That's why I don't like the SAT. Let's just make IQ tests legal to apply in the workplace. But California said there's some biases attached to these tests. We're not going to do it. So then they started to assess the students as they came in to see where they were at a skill level on mathematics. This guy teaches the calculus. So before 2020, when they said no more SAT, no more ACT, Berkeley administered an exam to incoming calculus students. So from 2018 to 2020, 71% of the students were ready to go. So 7 and 10. Some of them were a little bit behind, but less than 1% were unable to do basic algebra like this guy is currently dealing with. Very few students were actually there. Now, jump ahead. After 2020, when they said we're not looking at the SAT scores anymore, 2021, 2023, the share who were ready were 50%. We dropped from 70 to 50 and then to 40% in 2023. By 2023, more than 1/3 had severe math deficits, and the single most common score on this exam was 0. We're now 6 years post-coronavirus. So to say that this is a learning loss, 6 to 7 years, really, because 2020 January or March were 6.5 years. You can't lay it completely at the feet because the kids going into college now were in 5th grade.
Well, yeah, but that was that whole middle school time, when
Yeah,
they
that's
should have learned
true.
this stuff. Yeah, but this is where I go back to, you can't quantify all the damage that was done. But I do see your point. This is a larger education issue, and I would make the case that education has been purposefully dumbing down our kids for the last 4 or 5 generations. This has been a thing since the progressive era, but that could go off on a whole different tangent.
Oh, well, I mean, at least good on that professor for saying that there's maybe an institutional problem here. We need to turn around and go back. Whereas other professors that I want to talk about are just using the AI to do their job for them. So, New York Post, Harvard professor slammed for using AI to write an anti-Trump op-ed, quote, worst slop I've seen. And we know that New York Post did not use AI to write its headline because they have a typo in it.
Oh my goodness, to write. I mean, that's pretty incredible. And just a perfect headline for that too.
So this is another University of California. This one comes from Davis, so not nearly as esteemed as Berkeley. He recently, I'm sorry, not this different guy. This guy is a Venezuelan minister. This guy is probably mad because they took Maduro out of the country. This guy, his name is Ricardo Hausman. He put this op-ed in the Financial Times, which is far left, so it was met with a sympathetic recipient. They probably didn't do the due diligence on it, but now they've had to retract it. And there was an assessment done, and the likelihood of this guy use this AI to dunk on Donald Trump, I have the image of it. It's 71%.
That's awesome.
That this guy just plugged it into Grok or Chat GPT and said, write something mean about the president. And Financial Times just took it.
That's awesome.
It criticized the tariffs. And that was, I guess, enough because I guess Financial Times is heavy on the tariffs, which again, I'm not big on the tariffs, particularly the refunds. Did you get your refund check from the tariffs yet?
That's funny, Steve. You're fun. I like that. You got jokes today, y'all.
It's that kind of environment. All right.
But before you move on, though, I was checking in with my research assistant over here, and I can tell you for a fact. Don't ask me how I know, but in 1994, I know that an SAT score of 970 could get you into the University of Nebraska. Again, don't ask me how I know that.
You just got through, man.
Don't ask
through
me.
the cracks.
Yeah,
now,
but it's different today. They've tightened standards. It's apparently 1040 now to get into Nebraska. It was 850 in 1994. And again, I don't know how I would know that 970 can get you in. But anyway, there you go. I have some fun facts for you there.
So I went through high school and it was the 1600 in the SATs, and people who took ACTs are like, that's like kilometers to them. They have no idea. So the score was 800 for math, 800 for verbal, 1600 total. That was the perfect score.
Yep.
And then my brother's a few years younger than me, and the SAT introduced another section. It was like a writing section, and they did it to actually elevate the scores of girls. They said that girls were better at writing and they wanted more parity through the gender, peak DEI type of stuff.
Yeah.
And they added another whole section that was 800 points. So a max score went from 1600 to 2400. And my brother got a 1600. So he still claims to everybody that he got a 1600 on his SAT.
I like your brother. That is awesome. Can I just say, and ladies, I'm not trying to be offensive here. I'm throwing out facts here. I don't know why you're trying to elevate girls' scores, because in 1994, when I entered Schramm Hall, a residence hall, a 10-story dormitory building at the University of Nebraska campus, the first floor was just, the first floor. And then the residence halls were 2 through 10. And the boys' school floors were the even numbers. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay. Shout out to Schramm 10. What up? And then the odd numbers were the girls. 3, 5, 7, 9. See, I can actually do this. So there you go. See? 5 boys' floors, 4 girls' floors. My son and I visited the campus in 2016, so we're now 22 years removed. Look at this math, man. Just sparks are flying out of my brain. And it was the opposite now. Now the girls represented the even floors, and the boys were the odd numbers. So the girls, if you extrapolate that throughout the campus, if you have one extra floor for girls more than boys, then obviously you're well more than 50%. See, I'm just the math. So my point is, girls aren't having a hard time getting into colleges, main colleges and universities. I mean, just if Schramm Hall is an example. There you go. I'm done.
I think that's reflective of all across the board. I think the majority of college students right now are female, which is probably why they no longer do the extra SAT. They went back to 1600.
Oh, they did.
That, or I mean, maybe nobody knows how to write anymore because Chat GPT.
That's fair. Oh, I've got to tell you, as I ask my assistant at universities, I'm checking right now what the stat is. There's a video out there, and I played it on my show. This professor, or I think he was a high school teacher, I don't know, but genius genius. So he presents the thing. It's an assignment, and it's like a take home test or something. I don't know,
I
but he
know that.
put. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Have you talked about this on your
Yeah,
show?
is the
Okay.
Industrial Revolution exam.
Yes. And buried in there is the little invisible thing about say something that doesn't apply about
Yeah,
Madagascar.
about Madagascar, and 32 out of 35 kids failed the exam.
They just copied and pasted his assignment into AI and then came back with this paper. They didn't even read their own paper nor read what they had copied and pasted. I mean, that says a lot of stuff right there.
And that's so lazy, because I
Mhm.
would think that a exam response would be a few paragraphs. It's hardly going to be Crime and Punishment. And to
Mhm.
not proofread it just shows
Right.
how easy button the culture is at this point.
Right. 58 to 42 females over males as far as
Wow,
undergraduate enrollment at universities.
Incredible. That's incredible. Well, I don't know what it is at my alma mater. It's got to be close to parity, which is interesting because my dad went there and was an all male school. So it's completely changed at this point.
Mhm.
All right. Let's a little softer stuff to close us out for today, because I saw this story. Actually, my wife was watching a video on it at the same time that I happened to see an article about it. So I said, all right, that means it has penetrated into Madam Friend's awareness. This is probably something of interest to the audience, and that is how people are being duped by food labels, which I've talked about a little bit before, but I'm hardly one of these like hardcore gotta eat none of the seed oils and all that stuff. I'm just out of my depth on it a little bit, but I did get a laugh out of it, because the headline from the Dallas Express, which is the People's paper, Keith, headline: Are consumers being duped by avocado oil labels on healthier snacks? Now, this is the California guy. University of California Davis study found that 48 out of 54 processed food products labeled as containing avocado oil as the sole oil ingredient failed authenticity testing. That's like 80 something percent of them.
Yeah, wow.
That's like the study about the sushi that I guess there was a college study that went around that lab tested sushi around the country and found that all of the fish just about in sushi that you get at major franchises is just tilapia, and they claim that it's something else. So they're just using really cheap, nasty fish.
Wow. So I don't feel bad that I'm 50 years old and I still to this day refuse to even try sushi. No, thank you.
You live in America. We cook stuff.
Thank you.
Plus, you don't want to be hungry 30 minutes later.
We cook stuff in avocado oil.
Avocado. But the larger attached piece that I had, because I started to dig into it a little bit more, and it's one of my favorite things to dig into, because it is funny how the law, I'm letter of the law guy, right? What are the elements of the crime? This is an FDA link here, the use of healthy claim on food labeling. And it was a couple years ago that they tried to push through, I guess, from the federal government, a little bit more scrutiny. It was an updated claim: foods such as water, avocados, nuts and seeds, higher fat fish, salmon, olive oil will qualify as, quote, healthy. And then there's an actual push to put a label from the FDA, like the way that they grade meat. As I guess I'll have some sort of like H with a bald eagle flying behind it or something like that. That'll indicate that this is government approved healthy. This is approved by the people that told us when I was a kid that we should base our entire diet on eating cereal. Make sure that there's lots of grain on the and to start your day off. You definitely won't have a crash by 10:30 a.m.
Oh, yeah.
But now, this is where the push is for. Yeah, you go. It's gluten free.
I brought my Rice Crisps today from Great Value brand. I wanted everybody to see this is a breakfast of champions. Okay, there you go.
But the labeling that gets people, because very few people are educated. They didn't go to college to become a nutritionist. They're not reading the scientific literature, but we all kind of pretend that we know things. We don't want everybody to think that we're dumb. So when they say things like avocado oil, you're like, oh, I think that's probably better for me, so I'll pay a little bit more for it. Non-GMO. I'm like, what does GMO even stand for? Gluten-free. And then all natural. There's no legal consequences for saying the term all natural, because it occurs in the world on Earth. It means it's all natural. If it isn't something from outside of our realm, like on Asgard with Thor, then you don't have to call it not natural. You could put that label onto everything, which is why if I walk down the grocery store aisle, I will see the powderized lemonade that says all natural lemonade. It's just fine. It's all marketing. It's all what it is.
I loved your other example offline. Tell everybody what you're driving around on.
My all natural, well, I live in Florida, but so they're not snow tires, but they do come in nature. So they're all natural tires, 4 of them.
All natural snow tires.
Mm-hmm.
Or all natural tires. Yeah, the rubber plant, right? That's right, man. That is, I mean, and they do the same thing with beef too, right? They've got specific definitions, and I don't remember all the designations, and maybe there's a beef person out there that could do a little Cliff Notes version for us in the chat. But there's like, to qualify as organic or all natural or free range and all these little things.
Grass-fed.
Yeah. So I feel like at least the definitions are strict, but I don't know that enforcement is. But you're right, man. That all natural, that covers a lot of bases. And and I guess cereal, RFK is changing cereals, and now the all natural what do you call it, colors and all that stuff. Like that at least is getting an overhaul. So I don't know ultimately if everything is going to be touched by RFK and Maha phrasing, but maybe the FDA will change some things. But remember what you just did there with the avocado oil. That reminds me when I was a kid. Remember how everything was? See, you're so much younger than me. But
you're gonna make me play it, aren't you?
They went through the.
Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40!
I used to wear that clip out on Charleston, South Carolina radio on my segment on the talk station there. Shout out to WSC. How y'all doing at 94.3? But what I started to say is they went through this whole thing with light, and they thought it was so cute the way they spelled light, L-I-T-E. What the hell does that even mean? Like, what is that definition to qualify for light? Not L-I-G-H-T, but L-I-T-E. And
less letters. It's lighter.
Right. It's just this weird arbitrary thing that triggers the old advertising Edward Bernays brain, where you're just like, oh, I bet this is better for me. And 9 times out, well, I don't know. Now I'm just throwing out crazy numbers. See, getting myself in trouble. A lot of times, the light is less healthy for you than just the regular one. It's just a marketing thing, like you said.
Or it's just less. Or they'll say, buy our Fruit Loops with now 1/3 less sugar, and you open it up and it's got 1/3 less Fruit Loops in the bag.
Look, we're being honest, right? We got there, man. Yeah, advertising. Yep. It's a fun world, and the stuff that we fall for, and the marketing. It goes right back to where we started today's discussion with the COVID vaccine. Boy, they shoved that propaganda down your throat and made sure they got people that you trusted, whether you trusted a celebrity or not. You wanted to for COVID, so you rolled up that sleeve. Ugh, no, thank you.
Oh, all right. Well, way to bring it home there, Keith. Full circle for today on the Tuesday edition of the American Radicals podcast with Keith Malinak from At the Mic. All right, we've hit the end, but we'll be back with you guys tomorrow, Wednesday, same time, 07, and also scheduled to air again noontime on the AMRAD Pod Show on YouTube and Rumble and over at Spotify. Keith, thanks again for joining me.
I love it. Thanks for having me, brother.
All right, see you guys tomorrow.
You've been listening to the American Radicals podcast. Find us on YouTube, Rumble, and X at AMRADPod.